Hi everybody, welcome back to the Skookum Report. Tonight's encounter is entitled A Night in the Sierras, and it comes to us by way of Bobby Short's friends and family, and I want to thank them once again. And it goes like this. It was June 1988, and I'd been camping for 3 days in the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains. I was in my sleeping bag and listening to my shortwave radio at a pretty loud volume. It was almost 9 p.m., and there had just been an announcement for the Lone Ranger on radio station KNX. Only a few minutes before, a party of 3 went by on the trail, and I exchanged a few words with them about the local fishing. It was only moments later when a scream rang out that could turn your hair white. It was no further than 100 feet away from me, but out of my line of sight due to a nearby ranger snow survey cabin. I've never to this day heard anything even remotely like that sound. It was a big, deep sound, and despite the immediate trembling fear I felt, I got up and grabbed my 6-volt flashlight and put the light to the ground in front of me. I walked over to the trail in the direction of the sound, and the size of what I saw running off toward the river almost makes me wish I had never gone to look. I remember shaking, standing there hearing it thrash through the small pole pines and brush down by the creek. The only way I have of estimating its size is by the administrative pasture corral that was between me and it. Even though I never saw it face to face, the split-second glimpse I got turned me into no better than a frightened 3-year-old who had just seen a monster. A conservative estimate of its size would be 7 foot plus. There's no way that this was a bear or a mountain lion. I've spent hundreds of nights in the mountains, and I know what I saw and heard, and I've been looking for it ever since I realized it was out there. I think it was there all along, but I never put it all together until last year when I met a man who told me about a sighting of a Sasquatch only a few miles away from a favorite quail hunting spot of mine down in the Traverse Ranges. What got me to go investigate was that something had made me feel uneasy enough to pack up and leave early from a great hunting trip. At that time, I had no idea, but when I went out to the area of this man's sighting and I heard banging and whistling in the chaparral, that's when I realized I had heard that unique high-pitched whistle before when I was in Kern County. Since then, I've read all that I could on the subject. And this year I started to blow a slide whistle in an attempt to attract the creature, so I could get a moving picture of it if possible. Now, I know this is a lot harder to do than it sounds, and I know it would take cunning and nerve to get close enough to actually film it. And getting back to what I remember about that night, the prominent thing would be the smell. Initially, I noticed nothing, but over the next few hours, I kept smelling what I thought were rotting oranges. At times it smelled very strong, like when you have a bag of fruit in your refrigerator and open it and find them green and moldy. I'm sure it was around for a few hours. I don't know how to describe it, but you could definitely feel it. I kept hearing things, first on one side, then down on the other below me in the creeks. I just sat there with my single mantle Coleman lantern on, just listening. I kept trying to rationalize it away, but the experience was shocking, and it was very hard to deal with in my mind. I decided to build a fire, and I felt a little safer after that. Now, at about 1 a.m., I found myself drifting off to sleep. My lantern was almost out of fuel, so I filled it and put it down by my ground cloth, and that's where I slept until first light. I remember thinking the birds were a good sign that it had moved on. When I woke, the lantern was still burning, which helped me realize it wasn't just a bad dream. All I could think about was getting as far away from there as I could as fast as possible. I spent about a half hour looking for tracks, but all I could find were some splashed areas near the creek and some small plants that had been pulled up and put down on a stump that they weren't there the day before. I thought that was very odd. All I can say about a description is that it weighed a lot more than I do, and it appeared black, although I never put my light directly on it. It was gone from view in under 10 seconds, In retrospect, I realized I should have stayed around the whole next day and looked for physical evidence, but the only thing I could think about was getting out of there. That evening, the people that were on horseback, by the way, who had gone by just prior to the scream the night before, they came by going the opposite way, and I asked them if they had heard the thing and what they thought it was. These people had worked cattle in this area for years. After a short discussion about the sound I had heard and speculation on whether it could have been a fisher, which is a weasel-like animal with dark fur, the older man in the group suggested it must have been a Bigfoot. I let them bring up the subject. When I had gotten back into town, I went to the Forest Service station office, and a man with a backpack was filling out a report about how half of his food had vanished from a tree in the middle of the night. He said his food was 7 feet off the ground or higher, and he was about 6 foot tall. He tied 2 bags of food to one side of his bear rope with a parachute cord, and then counterbalanced the other side with a piece of wood of equal weight. And he had put a 30-gallon plastic trash bag over the food at about 1 a.m. Because it had started to rain. When he got up, the plastic bag had been stretched apart and one bag of food was gone. Nothing was ripped, chewed, shredded, or torn, and the other half was still in the tree. I have yet to meet a bear that exhibits such traits. I mentioned the word Sasquatch, and all 4 Forest Service employees in the room went silent and looked around at each other. One man said it must have been a marmot. That's a burrowing rodent. I hope I pronounced that correctly. M-A-R-M-O-T. Now, since this time, I talked to a man who has lived in the area for most of his 60 years. He told me that him and his 80-year-old mother had seen a 9-foot-tall red Bigfoot in the area 2 years earlier. He described the tracks perfectly. He said he never talked about it with anybody because no one would believe him. In that very same area in 1986, 2 scientists doing wildlife studies reported hearing loud screams that they couldn't identify. I'm just curious as to why the Bigfoot didn't take both bags of food out of the tree. I know it could have carried them, but anyway, that's it for that encounter. And this next piece is a small excerpt taken out of a publication called Weird California. And it's short, but it's super interesting, and I wanted to share it with you guys. It's entitled The Big Hairy Man of Cherokee Road. And it goes, Charles Jackson and his son Kevin got the shock of their lives on the afternoon of July 12, 1969. They were at their home on Cherokee Road in Oroville, well southeast of Bluff Creek, but not very far from the Pluma National Forest. The father and son were working peacefully in their backyard, burning rabbit entrails, when a huge ape-like creature loped out of the woods and stopped to stare at them. The beast was 7 to 8 feet tall and had large breasts and was covered with 3-inch long gray hair except on its hands and face. The Jacksons, only about 15 feet away at the time, said that after it spotted them, it walked up to the outhouse, looked around, and then suddenly ran back into the woods. Another Cherokee Road resident had a run-in with the ape man around the same time as the Jackson incident. For weeks, Homer Stickley's farm had been haunted by something that screamed in the woods at night and stole apples from his trees. Then one moonlit night, Stickley saw the culprit, a tall, 2-legged creature that walked through a nearby meadow, pausing to stop and stand beside a stump. By September, at least a dozen people had reported giant ape-like things running around Oroville, but the Cherokee Road sightings remained the most documented and credible of the lot. 6 years later, people were still seeing the beasts and finding their huge footprints in the area, but the creatures remained at large. By then, Oroville had established itself as another home of North America's most famous land monster, Bigfoot. And that's a real cool little piece. If you or anybody that you know has had a Bigfoot encounter or a sighting and you'd like to have it on the show, just shoot me an email at skookumreport@gmail.com. That's skookumreport@gmail.com. And I'll be sure to get it up on the show for you, no problem at all. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment. I enjoy talking with you guys. I want to send a shout out to Big Mike and say what's up to him. And I appreciate all of you, and hopefully see you again tomorrow on the Skookum Report. All right, guys, take care. God bless. Bye.